Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher. This is GM Philosophy, the channel where we empower game masters to run better games. Today we're talking about how do I run a compelling one-on-one D&D campaign. The other day I posted in the Discord, what would you like me to make some videos about? And a bunch of people commented with some awesome ideas. This one was commented by D. Coopark. D. Coopark, thank you for leaving this comment and suggestion. So I actually do have some experience running one-on-one D&D campaigns. I've run a couple of these. Mostly they didn't go super well, but I did have one pretty successful one that I ran it probably went 7 or 8 sessions. It was a pretty good adventure arc. It was actually a zombie apocalypse sort of setting. And so I have a couple things to say about this. Number one, the big challenge with one-on-one D&D games is that you can run into kind of an energy problem. So when you have more players, you have more energy, more people, more creative energy being put into the game, and then the better those players are, the more energy you have basically being contributed, and this makes the game more fun. This boosts enthusiasm. This basically makes the game just, I would say, way more exciting in general. And then, of course, as you add more players, the only downside is each player gets less game time, less screen time, so to speak, right? Because there's only so much space. Now, in one-on-one, what you have is minimal energy input, maximum storytelling ability. Because if one person has the whole session, they can really deeply develop that character, they can really deeply develop that adventure, and you can do a lot with that. The problem is overcoming the energy, the deficiency. And it can also be just in general a little awkward to roleplay with one person. But anyway, if you can overcome the awkwardness, which is kind of more of a personal thing, and a self-belief and confidence thing, then you can get to the energy problem. And so here's what I think really matters when you're doing one-on-one roleplay. Number one, I think it has its place. I don't know if I would pursue it as a primary means of playing D&D or TTRPGs. I don't really think that this is how TTRPGs were designed. I don't really think that they are at their best when it's just a GM and one player. But there are times when this can be very useful. Role-playing out a character's backstory, taking a session, this is a good idea. Taking each character, each player, and then having like a short 1-hour session where you kind of role play through something in their backstory to prepare and set the tone for the upcoming campaign. That can be a really fun way to kind of use this. It's a bit more limited and it's for a larger purpose. If you're going to just run a one-on-one campaign, here are my tips. I would encourage you to really make sure that you develop in-depth world state and in-depth NPCs, because when there are more player characters to fill the silence, there's a little bit less pressure to deliver deep NPCs, deep world state stuff. But with a one-on-one, that is all there is. So you have to really get deep. You have to really expand those pixels. You've got to really make your world sharp. You've got to really give it depth, because with only one player character, they're going to be looking for you to create maximal depth. And that's one of the challenges. Personally, I think that's fun. Personally, I like getting that in depth with like an NPC or a couple NPCs and the villain and situations. I like that. However, I am a very improvisational game master. I tend to do minimal prep. Mostly I improv with the foundations that I laid in session prep. I basically just prepare the situation and then I let player choices dictate what actually happens, and of course NPC choices and villain choices. I don't script a lot of that out. I think that makes it... Here's what I think that does for me. I think that makes me vulnerable to not going deep enough in prep if I'm going to do one-on-one. Because a lot of times, a lot of depth comes from the other players. But if there's 6 other players, that's a lot different than if there's only one. So for me, I think I would need to crank up the depth of my prep if I was going to play with one person. I would really need to plan out more things so that I'm starting at a more in-depth place. And I think that where I might excel, the upsides for me are that I do have that improvisational like knack. And I'll also say this, I think that playing one-on-one gives you way more opportunity to lean into the art of it. So like you can spend 3 times the amount of time on your descriptions of things as you could normally. Normally, if you spend too much time on your descriptions, half the session is you just talking with 6 players kind of sitting there twiddling their thumbs. So you got to be a little careful, and you've got to kind of say what matters most, but let the mind's eye of the players kind of dictate what they see based on what you tell them. Whereas with one-on-one, even if you fill half the time with descriptions, that one player is still getting way more screen time than they would normally get in playing with a party of 4 or 5 or 6. So you have a lot more freedom to go deep on descriptions, vivid descriptions. I like to think about this in terms of like, we can get very high detail. I can describe a room in a way that might evoke greater emotional impact. And I could create emotional impact maybe just with the description of the room, or, you know, with the way the light is hitting the pictures on the windowsill, and there's a sketch of the family, and you can see that it's collected dust, and you know, you can see that it hasn't been moved in a long time, and there's all these things. Maybe it's like a shrine to the children that were lost in the war, to this family, and now it's just an old man who lives by himself, and this is all he has to remember them by. And you know, you could create emotional impact from far more different types of things that you wouldn't really try to do it with if you were playing with 6 players. I wouldn't normally try really hard to create emotional impact with a room description because there just isn't really time, and the bang you get for your buck, it has diminishing returns with 6 players. The emotional return you're going to get on your investment isn't worth the time you take away from the player characters. But in a one-on-one, you can make greater investments in those things, and the returns will be bigger because they will all be angled at deriving an emotional response from this one player. So you can really actually make great inroads in that area when you're playing one-on-one. This is an opportunity. This kind of makes it an awesome and compelling kind of thing. Here's the thing, though. I do feel like it's not a long-term recipe for success in most cases, because I feel like with one player and one GM, the energy is going to kind of struggle. And so a one-shot, or even like an hour-long session, or a series of 1 or 2 hour-long sessions where you're preparing for a group game, I think that is where this format shines. I think that if you're trying to run from levels 1 to 20 with one other person, you're either going to need, both of you are going to need to be a real specific type of individual who self-feeds with creativity, self-induces energy. You need to be able to generate your own energy, whereas a lot of people rely on the energy they get from other people to bounce it back and forth. So it's going to rely on that a little bit to make that work. And also, the two of you are just going to have to be, I mean, really, really committed to the detail and appreciate what you can create, as opposed to comparing that to a larger game with more people, because there will not be the same experience. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. I'm going to say that I don't think it's the way optimally the majority of TTRPG games are going to be successful. The majority of TTRPG games are going to be most successful with somewhere from 3 to 8 players. Kind of just depends on how much time you have to play, what everyone's style is like. I personally kind of love that 4 to 5 zone. At 6, I start to feel like we lose definition a little bit unless the players are a very specific type of players. I have played with groups up to 13 players before. I would never try to do that on a VTT. I think that people would not get enough playtime. I think that in person that can work better. That's still a lot of players. I still think that we get the best definition when we're going 3 to 6, 3 to 7. My personal favorite is like 4 or 5. Because I like to get a little more serious about each player character. I like to focus on each player character more. And in fact, this is really interesting. When I was running the Barren Lands, I would often between sessions have players say, "Hey, are we going to look for another player?" Because for a while there we were running 4 players, and I felt like that was a magic sweet spot. But I think some of the players kind of felt like I would like to have another player or two. It would add more energy, and so that's really interesting. I think that that also factors in. How many players do your players like to play with? As a GM, you may have a different idea about that, but I kind of think that letting the players have a say in that is really important, because you want their energy levels to be good. And I think that that actually might be more important to the story than having the perfect number of players for you as the GM. Maybe playing with one or two fewer, or one or two more than you might prefer is better if all of your players like that better. And then but that takes us back to that one-on-one. Who really wants to do that? I don't think there are that many players who would find that super exciting for the long term. If you find the right player, and if you're the right kind of GM, though, the incredible opportunity for definition, I mean, it would be unmatchable. I think that that kind of campaign could really get deep. It could provide some insane depth, and that could be the benefit. But it does come with its drawbacks. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment, let me know. Watch some more of my awesome videos, whichever side of the screen they're on. My camera mirrors it, so I don't know what's going on. I will talk to you awesome people on the next one.